As the Allies and the Red Army advanced towards the heart of the Third Reich, the true horrors and crimes of the Nazi regime were uncovered. With the miles of diminishing Nazi-occupied territory which was taken, concentration camps were discovered that showed how dark the heart of one of the world's most evil regimes was. The Red Army and the Allies would liberate many concentration camps, but what they were greeted with was a sight which represented true hell on earth. The sights which greeted the British, for example, as they liberated Bergen-Belsen concentration camp would be truly barbaric, with piles of bodies of the innocents stacked up with around 13,000 corpses lying around the camp unburied. The British and Canadians who liberated the camp would also find 60,000 inmates who were completely starving, near death and also suffering from diseases such as typhus. The prisoners had been left without food and water for days, however they would not be left alone. A number of the camp's guards and other staff would remain at the camp, clutching on to the last pieces of power that they had. One such despicable human was Dr. Fritz Klein, the infamous Doctor of Belsen. So join us today as we look at the justified execution of Fritz Klein, the barbaric Doctor of Belsen. And remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. It wasn't just the infamous Josef Mengele who would perform experiments and horrific acts on prisoners inside concentration camps. Fritz Klein was born on the 24th of November 1888 in what is now central Romania. Despite his birthplace, he was considered to have been an ethnic German, someone who Hitler championed during his time as Führer. During his early life, he would attend the University of Budapest and would study medicine, hoping to become a doctor. As the First World War broke out, he was forced to postpone his studies, completing military service in Romania, before he resumed his medical degree. He would graduate from Budapest University and would go on to work as a doctor in Siebenbergen in Romania. As the Second World War broke out in 1939, Klein, being a Romanian citizen, was drafted into service within the Romanian army. This is where he put his medical skills to use. He would serve as a lieutenant doctor for the Romanians from 1939 to 1943 and would also at this time work as a paramedic in the deepest depths of the Eastern Front. However, in 1943 his life would drastically change. In May 1943, the Romanian fascist dictator would give in to the stern demand from Hitler. Hitler demanded that Marshal Antonescu should place all of the ethnic Germans in the Romanian army into the German army and the Wehrmacht to bolster the German army's numbers. With this, Fritz Klein now became a soldier or a doctor for the Wehrmacht instead of the Romanian army. Klein would become a soldier in the Waffen-SS, the military branch of the infamous SS, and was posted to Yugoslavia to work. On the 15th of December 1943, Klein would find himself arriving at Auschwitz concentration camp for work. He would enter the camp as a camp doctor within the women's camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the extermination part of Auschwitz. Following employment here, he was then transferred to the Gypsy camp and also the Jewish mixed family. He was around one of 8 doctors who did work at Auschwitz. During his time here, he would take part in many of the selections being the part which struck fear into the hearts of the prisoners. It was during this time that prisoners would be sent to the gas chambers if doctors such as Klein deemed them not fit enough to work. He stated at his trial, "I was given orders to divide the selections into 2 parts, those who were fit enough to work and those who were not fit, that is those who because of their age could not work, who were too weak, whose health was not very good, and also children up to the age of 15. The selecting was done exclusively by doctors. One looked at the person and if she looked ill, asked a few questions, but if the person was healthy, then it was decided immediately. So Fritz Klein would be the man who had the life of thousands in his hands." Klein would admit that he heard much talk about the selections in the hospitals and that the doctor had to make the selection, claiming he was forced to do so. He did admit he had knowledge of the gas chambers and crematoria. He would also admit that during one stint working in the hospital, performing selections, he would make a selection of those prisoners suffering from scabies who would meet their imminent demise. Klein did also visit the gas chambers himself, but would state how he had no official duties to perform there, such as administering the gas. He would maintain that he would have nothing to do with the experiments that also took place inside Auschwitz, the sort of experiments Mengele would become infamous for. Klein did say he had knowledge of this, but he did not participate. It was clear that Klein was the person who did make the decisions as to sending thousands of people to their deaths. He would remain at Auschwitz for almost 2 years before he was transferred to Bergen-Belsen at the start of 1945. He would state how he noticed primitive hospitals inside Belsen and how he noted the situation was deteriorating rapidly with regards to overcrowding and also the horrendous conditions inside Belsen. Belsen did not have gas chambers there, but the camp was being gripped by a serious epidemic of typhus, which was killing between 200 and 300 people a day. Klein would claim that during his time as doctor, he did hand out huge amounts of food and milk to the children, women and sick prisoners, but this is certainly disputed. The situation at Belsen was dire, with the camp's population starving and dying. Klein would also say how he believed those inside Auschwitz had been kept in better conditions than those at Belsen, and that they were in better physical health. When asked at his trial, "Do you seriously think that the SS had any intention of using Belsen as a convalescent camp?" he said, "In the beginning there was some talk of the camp being used as some sort of exchange camp for prisoners, but later on it did not give me that impression at all. It was a camp for sick people, it was a death camp, a torture camp." The sight that greeted the liberators of Belsen would stick with those men until their dying day, with the sheer death and depravity shocking all those around the world when the barbaric truths of the Holocaust were captured on film. Fritz Klein would stay at the camp after liberation and was arrested and placed on trial during the Belsen trials, along with the infamous camp commander Josef and guard Irma Grays. Klein, when asked about how he deemed his actions, would shockingly state, "My Hippocratic oath tells me to cut a gangrenous appendix out of the human body. The Jews are the gangrenous appendix of mankind, that's why I cut them out." It was clear that he was a barbaric man and was tried at Belsen as defendant number 2. He was found guilty of war crimes within Auschwitz and also Belsen and was sentenced to death. It would be famous British executioner Albert Pierpoint who would administer the justice at Hamlin Prison. On the 13th of December 1945, Klein would be executed. In the days before, he had been kept in a small cell following his sentence of death and was kept alongside a number of the other guards and camp staff at Belsen on a wall of cells. At the end of the cells, the execution chamber could be found, where a group had assembled a gallows which had the capacity to perform 2 executions simultaneously. Klein's weight and height had been taken into consideration, with Pierpoint and his assistant calculating the drop to kill the doctor of Belsen. On the 13th of December, Klein, along with the commandant of Belsen, Josef, were taken out of their cells to the execution chamber and hanged by Pierpoint inside Hamlin Prison. The executions of the first 2 defendants were performed simultaneously, and then after a short time in which the pair had been hanged, they were cut down with their bodies cremated and ashes scattered in an unknown location. So much is known about the story of Josef Mengele. However, from looking at the story of Fritz Klein, it's shocking to see that there were many more doctors performing horrific roles to escalate and quicken up the genocide. Klein himself can be summed up in his own words. He's a man who genuinely believed that the minorities targeted by the Nazis were like a gangrenous appendix who needed cutting out of society. He was a man who played God with people's lives, who would decide who would live and who would die. Fritz Klein was an evil man, whose execution was certainly a justified one. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.